Well, hey, everybody who is here. Sorry about that. Welcome. I hope that you can hear me and stuff. I just tested it and apparently you can't hear me. So, welcome. This is my first stream on Mr. Zod Extracurricular, which is my very small secondary channel. This is just an opportunity to kind of fool around and do stuff that I wouldn't necessarily do on a main channel. And I just thought it'd be kind of fun to talk about time travel and stuff, just because I'm sure we're all a bunch of dorks and that's the kind of stuff we enjoy. Also, I thought it would just help get my juices flowing prior to me actually making the video about this. I'm working on it right now. I've scripted some of it, have recorded little parts of it in bits, and I'm still working on it. I haven't talked at all about movies or anything like that. So I just thought it'd be fun to generally, shoot the sheet about what we all think about time travel. You guys could ask me questions. I've offered patrons the opportunity to come on, audio and join me in conversation. If you want to do that, just let me know on the Patreon page, and I will do my best to respond to that if the opportunity arises. So, yes, card carrying member of Dorks Incorporated. I'm not familiar with that specific organization, but I'm sure I belong to it in spirit. So a big thing I think I'd want to talk about tonight, this is going to depend heavily on participation. I'm not prepared to give a whole presentation from the ground up. I don't usually stream by myself, so it feels a little awkward, to be honest. So interaction is always good. I usually stream on Zadanza with Dan. So sitting here talking in an empty room, unless I'm recording, feels very strange to me, especially knowing people can hear me right now. Yes, Dark Side, I know you just made it up. Well, I guess I had kind of assumed that. So hi, everybody's here. Hi, Fletcher. Hi, Dark Side of Delight Productions, Tilting Windmill, and Really question mark, who has an amazing name. So if you all have ideas you want to bring up, throw them in the chat. If you have specific movies that you would like me to talk about, we can do that. I think if you're the kind of person who bothered to come here, you probably think that time travel movies are generally pretty silly. That's how I think they are. It doesn't mean that they're bad. Hello, Drew. They can be a lot of fun, but the way they represent time travel is obviously going to be inconsistent and kind of, something you're going to be able to nitpick at if you're into the kind of stuff we are. So again, throw movies in the chat if you want to talk about them. My perspective about, really, I think they're fun too. I think they can be a huge amount of fun. Welcome, Jessica. But ways they portray time travel, if they're for comedy and stuff like that, great. If they try to be really dramatic and they do things that totally defy my intuition of how cause and effect should work, then it pulls me out of the moment. So my perspective on time travel and how I got into it, this feels a little bit like telling my testimony, is I was always a little interested in it. Back to the Future was within my time growing up. And at some point in high school, some friends and I were just sitting around BSing and talking about it. And that's where the grandfather paradox first occurred to me. If you go back in time and stopped your parents from meeting, you wouldn't just disappear like Marty McFly did. If you stopped yourself from being born, then nobody could go back in time and stop you from being born. It would turn into a big loop and stuff like that. Obviously that's incoherent. So long story short, where I ended up with it is that the idea that basically the timeline is set, reality cannot be contradicted. So if you traveled back in time, you simply wouldn't be able to do anything that would either stop you from being born or otherwise upset the timeline as you understood it. So yeah, you couldn't do anything that would stop you from time traveling. You couldn't even do anything that would alter the past as you correctly remembered it, I guess would be a way to put it. Larry McClellan, do I consider Groundhog Day style movies to be time travel? It's all a matter of semantics. They probably are somewhere within that genre. A lot of time travel, I think, is really, it's really at its core, I think, about a fascination with how we experience the passage of time and maybe kind of a yearning to go back to the past or to see the future. And so those movies do fall within that, but I don't think they fit what people think of as the typical you willfully choose to travel from one time to another with all the logical implications, I guess, that come with that. Uh, so anyway, my perspective is that time is set. If you were to go back in time, you can't change anything. And that's not because there's anything magical about the universe having a set course. It's just because you have prior knowledge of what's going to happen. And given that, basically reality can't contradict itself. The same thing can't be true at the same time, or sorry, two different things can't be true at the same time if they're mutually exclusive. So if you correctly remember things one way, you have 100% certainty that's going to happen. If you travel back in time and try to take certain actions, you might have, say, a 99% perceived certainty that you are able to carry out a certain task, but you wouldn't, that perceived near certainty is going to be trumped by the absolute certainty of what happened. That's roughly it. I don't need to go too much more into that. If you disagree with Matt, feel free to verbally abuse me in the chat. If you have any thoughts, feel free to share them. If you're a patron or maybe even otherwise, if you want to just join in and talk to me verbally, that would add a little variety to this and let you share your thoughts a little bit more if you're the kind of person who likes to rattle on and philosophize about this kind of thing. Double checking Patreon here real quick. I don't think I have any new messages there. So if anybody has specific movies they want me to talk about, or they have movies that they think anything particularly noteworthy happened in terms of it had a mind-blowing time travel scenario, or it was a specifically egregious, that's great. Fletcher from the Deep. So Terminator 1, but not Terminator 2. I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. Feel free to clarify. Jessica Bell, if you want funny time travel, watch the Doctor Who comedy charity skit, The Curse of Fatal Death. Maybe I'll check that out sometime. Did I see the Mad TV skit about the Terminator going back to save Jesus from being terminated? I don't think I saw that. I'm pretty sure I didn't see that one. Back when Mad TV was on, I probably would have been offended by that. Dunder Mifflin, Bill and Ted was good. I enjoyed Bill and Ted. The only, if we're to go beyond that being a really fun movie, and Bill and Ted is one of my favorite movies just in terms of goofy comedy. I really like it. Their interaction with time, as I recall, and feel free to chime in if you have more to say. I just remember them going back to the past to get information and pull people in as part of their history presentation. The only thing I can recall that violates any form of time travel logic in the first movie would be when I think they were trying to escape the police station and they needed to they put a garbage can over their dad's head or something like that in order to escape, which essentially I think creates a bootstrap paradox or a causal loop where in order to escape, they had to put the can over their dad's head to escape. And then escaping is what allowed them to do it. So, if they didn't help, they wouldn't have been able to get out and help. So, and they left a series of clues, Dunder Mifflin said. Yeah, there were all kinds of things they did. I think they hid keys somewhere and left little hints. But yeah, I don't think things could work that way. That's a series of events causing itself. But that's, especially when you're talking about Bill and Ted, that's just nitpicky. I'm not trying to dump on that movie. It's fun. It's just also fun to think about. I believe in Terminator 1 rules, not Terminator 2 rules. I'm still not totally sure what you mean by that. Uh, Terminator 1. So, Terminator, the premise of Terminator is that the machines wanted to go back into the past and kill John Connor because by doing so, they would be able to, they'd be able to defeat the resistance. From what I remember, Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 both had essentially the same problem, which number one, the premise was changing the past, which I don't think you'd be able to do. But then number two, both of them include a time loop or bootstrap paradox, where I think in the first movie, Kyle Reese, I think, in by going back to defend or by going back to ensure that John Connor can be born, he ends up fathering John Connor. So basically, the fact that John Connor exists and the Terminators will try to kill him led to his existence, which I don't think makes much sense. And then in number two, of course, there was they ran into a problem where they had to destroy the Terminator chip because the Terminator chip going back in time is what allowed the Terminators to be built. So again, that's something creating itself. I feel like I'm like dumping on movies that are really good, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. Those movies are still really fun. Even though Terminator is meant to be more dramatic, I can look past that stuff and just enjoy the movie. But if you want to think through the logic of how it works, I don't think that would work. And again, feel free to chime in if you think I'm off about something. I'm just like shooting from the hip here based on little comments I'm seeing. There's a lot of things about Doctor Who. Honestly, I haven't watched much Doctor Who. Sorry if you're a Doctor Who fan. I can get why people like it, but I found it to be very uneven, and I've just had trouble getting too into it, to be perfectly honest. The theme song is really cool. Some of the dramatic effects and stuff are cool. Episode by episode, I don't know, it depends. Maybe I've seen a lot of the wrong ones. Nick says, time travel is better than multiverse nonsense. Yeah, I agree. And I think one issue here is there's a little bit of overlap between the two. Pure time travel, the way I see it, is just simply you take one string of events, which would be our timeline. That's everything that's happened past, present, and future. And time travel in its purest, most basic form, if you just start with reality as we perceive it and add the ability to jump around in time, would just be disappearing from one time and reappearing in another, and then interacting with times that you don't really belong in. So essentially, traveling to the past would just be going to a time prior to what I would call your natural present and witnessing events that you might have foreknowledge of, depending on what you remember, and then being able to interact with those events, or traveling to the future and basically just skipping a lot of events and seeing things ahead of time. That's just adding the most basic elements of time travel to reality as we perceive it. If you do that, I don't think you'd be able to change things because, each event in time is just what it is. And so to change that would be to contradict reality. Change has to occur across time. So if you're changing what happened at a specific time, that's inherently contradictory. In order to kind of explain why things change, people usually talk about creating alternate timelines and stuff like that. And that's where I think you're adding more than time travel to the equation. I'm going to talk about this a lot more coherently in the actual video. Again, I'm just shooting from the hip, just to kind of sit around and talk to everybody here and respond to comments real time. But really, when they say you create different timelines or different alternate realities, essentially they're saying you create another universe that branches off. I don't see any reason why that makes sense. Again, I don't know the science of any of this stuff, but logically speaking, I don't see how that follows from anything other than the fact that when you run up against a perceived contradiction in how time travel would work, you just create another reality to resolve that. So essentially, I think most paradoxes in time travel are not paradoxes in how reality would work. They're paradoxes that come from our inability to resolve two things. One is that we get the perception of the time traveler's perceived timeline mixed up with the actual timeline of history, and then we also get we run into the conflict between the perceived certainty of being able to do a certain action in the past versus the actual certainty of the outcome that we know about. And so when you can't resolve those by recognizing that, the actual known outcome would trump what you think you can do, or that you think that when someone travels along through time, that suddenly changes would happen when they perceive things unfolding. I'm talking really poorly here. I could try to lay it a little better here in a second. Then when you can't reach those conclusions, you kind of get a little bit confused. Then you just say, basically, alternate timelines is saying, screw it, two different things happen at once. That's the way I view it anyway. Guy Person, listen, except for Looper, I think you can create any time rules you want. It's fiction. It's fun. I'm 100% on board with that. So when I nerd out on this, I just think it's kind of fun to think through. And so one of the first things I'm actually going to say in my video, and maybe I'm just going to spoil this so bad for the handful of you that hear that you won't even go watch it. Hopefully you still do. But at its core, we're talking about stuff that we made up. So when you talk about time travel, there is no time travel. When you talk about how it works, it doesn't work. It doesn't exist. So at its core, we're talking about things that we just made up. And so if two people have two different ideas that they made up that are in conflict, it's kind of silly to argue over which one's real. So to me, I'm just talking about which ones I find most consistent internally and most consistent with reality. And it's all just for fun. Yeah, really, not that you know of. I don't know that time travel exists. However, as a comedian once said, if time travel existed, then we'd see the year 2016 crawling with time travelers, to fix what happened. Yeah, but time travelers could exist and they would just be in secret. But what I mean is we don't have anything verifiable. We haven't observed it. So if we don't know about it, we can't really argue about it in any real way. So this is just me saying, if I sound like I'm dumping on a movie that you like, I'm not. I like a lot of those movies too. And any internal contradictions or whatever, they're just all in fun for the most part, unless they become distracting dramatically. And if somebody thinks of time travel as a different thing than I do, then we just go back and forth, shoot the breeze a little bit and then walk away feeling like we've done some fun thought experiments. That's about it. But Looper, I actually watched Looper in response to people commenting on my community post, and I'll talk about that in a second here. Larry McClellan, interesting story. I still can't believe my homeschooling funding mom let us kids repeatedly rent the Back to the Future movies from Blockbuster. It's an interesting coincidence because one of my siblings just watched Back to the Future over and over and over again for the same reason. He was homeschooled for a period of time and he just kept watching Back to the Future. So maybe that's just something people did. So Drew Harrison, interesting question. How would you make a time travel story interesting if you don't change anything? Bootstrap paradoxes are all over the genre. So this is where, number one, you can point out that certain ideas of time travel don't seem to make logical sense or don't seem to be consistent with reality and still just accept them. So maybe just go ahead and, do it just because it makes the story more interesting. However, I think there are ways to make the story interesting. I wouldn't rule out, just allowing for paradoxes and alternate timelines and things like that. Go for it. Have fun. Just do your responsibility as a writer. And as with everything else, don't ruin the feeling of the dramatic tension of the story, or don't make your inconsistencies a distraction. So just go for it and have fun. But I think I think you can actually make good time travel movies without doing that. The only time travel movie that I remember, the only big mainstream one I remember that was fully consistent and didn't mess up anything logically, and feel free to jump in if I'm wrong because I might have just missed something, was 12 Monkeys. I think 12 Monkeys just had somebody from the future go back to the past to try to collect materials in order to stop a virus. But within the movie, they understood uh, that they couldn't actually change the past. They couldn't stop the virus from breaking out because they understood that the past was set. So they were just trying to go back and get materials just to alter the course of events in their present. So I feel like 12 Monkeys was actually pretty solid. Guy Pearson, you just, sorry, I missed that. You just have to stick to your own rules. Don't break your own rules. Yeah, I think that's true. I do think there are some limits to that. And I'll get to that in a second, just as far as how I perceive it. Again, this is all a matter of taste because a lot of this just becomes a question of what you find distracting in fiction. And this is Ramble Maven brings up a good point. I think it would have to be more character focused if you don't change anything. And that gets to what I think can actually make really good time travel. So time travel would be very dangerous, not to the extent that a person could change the past and alter history and everything, because I don't think you could. That danger would not exist. There would be dangers, of course, of greedy people who could, without bending reality, go back and gather valuable resources and enrich themselves, and they could probably find ways to cheat at gambling. I'm trying to think if you could do that without creating a paradox of some kind. But one of the issues that I don't think people think about enough, and which I think starts to get explored in 12 Monkeys, I think it's also touched on in the really old Time Machine story and movie. It's just the psychological consequences of time travel. And so being cut loose in time, being able to, I think we're nostalgic creatures by nature. And that's part of the draw of time travel is we like the idea of being able to see the future and see outcomes of things. We like the idea of going to the past, revisiting things that we have memories of. People can already get too caught up in the past and get caught up in just looping through memories in their own minds. If you're able to actually go visit it, I think people could become deeply obsessed with it, and it could become just upsetting to get untethered in our sense of time and chronology. We rely a lot on just dwelling within the present. So I think that could become problematic. Even little things such as, I think you would lose your sense of, we ground ourselves in times just in terms of like anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, and things like that. If you left in time for like a week and then came back on the same day, would your birthday mean the same thing to you anymore? I don't know if this would be a big deal, but I think we ground ourselves so much in time and use that to, I think, kind of comfort ourselves and maybe push back our sense of existential dread. And I don't know. I just think I think that we don't think enough about what time traveling would do to our own minds and how psychologically damaging time travel could be. And I think there's a really rich area to explore there. If there's one problem with time travel movies and how flippantly they treat the phenomenon, it's not that I want to be a giant nerd just to spoil the movies. The reason I want to be a giant nerd is just because it's fun to talk about. But I think if there is one actual problem, is that there is a lot more interesting things than, I got to go stop somebody from, changing the past. It's just that you're taking the easy way out instead of exploring a lot more deep substantive things. And that's what I really enjoyed about 12 Monkeys is, along with the fact that, yes, there's the nerdy part where I think it's consistent because they didn't mess with timelines or anything like that. But I really enjoyed that it got into the head of how, I think James Cole was his name, just how much traveling different times and mess with his perception, how much he could get totally sucked up in sucked up in events from another time. Would you slap baby Hitler? No, he's just a baby. Maybe older. I don't know. There's plenty of people like that in our own time, though. I don't think you have to time travel to find someone like that to slap or even leave our country. Not that I condone slapping people. I'm just going to put that out there. But Looper, just to get back to Looper, because somebody mentioned that one, I enjoyed that a lot because somebody brought that one up. Just encourages art career. Yeah, really. Loopers, since people had mentioned it in comments, I actually thought starting off that one would actually be kind of realistic. Because spoilers, if you don't want to hear me spoil movies, you probably don't want to be here in general, because that's kind of what we're talking about. With Looper, I thought it would be kind of interesting because it was people in the future dropping, it's a mob in the future dropping people in the past so that they could be assassinated, but they weren't going into the past to mess with anything. So basically they were eliminating people in their own time, but it was by sending them in the past so that the government couldn't find the bodies. But then as it went on, they would do things like, in order to capture one of the people from the future. So if when the assassins who are working in this time get live past, I think 30 years in the future, then they send them back to assassinate themselves. And one of them escaped. And in order to track him down, they started doing things to the young person. And so as a person's running around in the present, if somebody scratched a message on his arm or something like that, he would see it suddenly starting to appear. And I think that's just nonsense. And to me personally, that's just me. That's the kind of nonsense that gets distracting. If you were to scratch the arm of a young person, the result would not be that they had no scars on their arm and that suddenly appeared when they were older. Again, that's one that comes from mixing up the time traveler's perceived sequence of events versus the actual sequence of events. That's just one I personally find distracting. That's just me. Same thing as in Back to the Future. When Marty accidentally broke his parents up, the result would not be that he would be born, live, travel back in time, and then slowly disappear from a photograph. That's obviously silly. But Back to the Future is a comedy, and the photograph of the slowly disappearing people is purely just a way to build tension. It's just a plot device. So, it doesn't make any sense at all, but you forgive it. In something that took itself as seriously as Looper, it just felt a little too silly. That was just purely my sense of perspective. Guy Pearson, 12 Monkeys absolutely messed with time. It's just that the narrative was always the way it happened. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Clearly it messed in time in terms of people traveled through it. I just didn't see them doing anything that seemed to violate logic and create paradoxes or anything. Donna Milfin, the engineers were creepy. If you're talking about the people in 12 Monkeys, I think that's true. Nick, is Idiocracy a time travel movie? We sure thought it was going to be until they went to Costco and found out what the time machine was, right? It kind of is. They use it's not literal time travel in that you're like actually transporting matter through time, but it feels like time travel in the sense that you are like a person goes asleep and wakes up in the future, which is essentially the same thing that traveling to the future would be. So it doesn't semantically fit it. It isn't technically time travel, but it kind of is because a person like falls asleep and experiences the future. Yeah, Guy Pearson, you're right. It's just cryogenically freezing somebody. So technically, absolutely not time travel. But it kind of functions that way in that a guy went to the future just in terms of what his experience was. The movie Frequency did something similar as Looper. They wrote it off as the old and new timelines converging. Yeah, there's always excuses like that. And I don't know, maybe they make some logical sense that I'm not aware of. but it just feels like just ironing out the plot or coming up with an explanation. Looper, I think they did a thing where they they got a little bit meta about it, where the old and young version of the guy, I can't remember his name, were sitting at the table talking, and the old one said, because the whole issue is why, if you go back in time and change things, would your memories change? Why wouldn't you just remember the way it was done originally the whole time? And Bruce Willis, the old guy, he said something about how his memories are just fuzzy, and I don't know. It tried to do something with his memories being vague, as if that fixes it. And then he just said, "I don't want to talk about it." So I think the movie is trying to have a little bit of a sense of humor about the whole thing. I love Larry McClellan. I love time travel movies like Primer, where there are dilemmas driven by having multiple copies of the same people running around. Dark Matter was also a good example. I'll have to check out more of these. There's a lot I just simply haven't watched. Drew Harrison. In Millennium, they had to replace the people they took with facsimiles so that it wouldn't be noticeable, but there were still effects. Oh, the engineer is the giant humanoid alien dude from Prometheus. Sorry, I'm talking about the wrong thing. Fletcher from the Deep. You can't discuss time travel movies if you hadn't seen Primer. So I guess I should just shut this off now. In fact, I should probably go back in time and not have this, haha, because I haven't seen Primer. I do want to watch that one. That's one that's on my list. I made a list from a lot of comments, and I watched Looper and I want to watch Primer too. So actually, I was going to ask, questions about what happens in Primer, but I think I just want to go experience it for myself. When you say Primer's a great time travel movie, just give me this little bit. Is it great entertainment wise? Is that what you mean? Which I assume, but do you also think would you say it's a good example of a movie working out time travel logically? Primer is hard sci-fi. Okay. That sounds promising. I'm not sure always what people mean exactly by that, but it's always a good sign in my mind. It's great in that you have to watch it 15 times to understand what's going on. I'm not sure if I'll have time for that, but I'm extra smart, so I'll just watch it once. Just keep being a dork. Can't think of any other time travel movies. I have a little list here. Let's see. People brought up Groundhog Day. Somebody brought up Time Bandits. I don't know if I've seen that one. If I did, it was a long time ago and I don't remember. Primer is just really tightly follows its own rules and it's a little esoteric. That sounds really good to me. It's also all about the logic, but also entertaining. Again, I don't care if it breaks the logic as long as it's being interesting. I think that's all. Well, having a good story for one thing, but as far as what I'm looking for time travel, as long as it's interesting, even if it bends or breaks rules, sometimes bending or breaking rules can be in service to a good story and just interesting thoughts about time travel. Really, at its core, time travel is just to get us either emotionally invested in, being elusive time and seeing different spans of history of our own lives, or just thinking through, doing thought experiments about time and effect. Or I don't remember what I said, thought experiments. So if something can be a little bit less realistic, quote unquote, in service of helping you think more about things and being thought provoking, then I'm all for that. Bring it on. I'm not such a dork that I want things to always be totally realistic. Ooh, Edge of Tomorrow. Does that count? That's a good question, because if I remember right, it's Edge of Tomorrow is essentially a Groundhog Day situation, isn't it? He just keeps experiencing the same day over and over again, and he has the chance to change it. Yeah, I really liked Edge of Tomorrow. It's depressing how long ago that was. I already felt like I was an old man back then. But it was a good movie. Essentially, I think if I remember, he has the ability to go back to the beginning of a day and rethink what he did. So he sucks at fighting, and he can keep learning and learning and retreading the day until he wins a battle or something. Really says, I like that old movie, The Time Travelers. It had mind-blowing ending. I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that movie. I'm looking it up right now. The Time Travelers. Is that a 1964 movie? It looks like it has a monster or something on it. The 11/22/63 book really says yes. Okay, I'll have to check that out. My time to watch movies is kind of limited. Well, it's limited by the fact that I choose to do other things like make YouTube videos. But he gets doused by an alien with time juice until his blood is taken away. He can go back. Oh, yeah. You're talking about Edge of Tomorrow. Is that the one it is? I forget the name. 1964 old movie. 11/22/63 is a movie. Oh, or a book. Sorry. Oh, it's also a miniseries? Oh, if we know anything about Stephen King, it's that the movie series might be not as good as the book. Red Dwarf episode Out of Time. Jessica, you have a lot of TV show time travel episodes. I don't really think about that. Partly, I guess it's hard to look up. That's the Edge of Tomorrow Tom Cruise film that I'm mentioning. Yeah. Let's see. What else do we have here? Butterfly Effect was not... I don't think that was really time travel. Or was it time travel? I think maybe he could time travel, but within his own... but he would travel back into his young body, if I'm correct. That's basically a typical Back to the Future type change the past movie. He would just go back, and whatever he did would affect the future. Maybe I'll have to check out 11/22/63. I enjoyed Arrival. What was Arrival a time travel thing? That was like an Aliens movie, wasn't it? I'm not saying you can't talk about it. I'm just trying to remember whether it was Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where they go back to Trouble with Tribbles. I think I've heard about that one, but I've never seen it. DS9, Trouble with Trouble. Trials and Tribulations. That title's worth it in and of itself. Oh, Secret of Arrival is that you don't know it's a time travel movie until you start watching it. Okay. That sounds a little familiar. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. Arrival has aliens with a language system that isn't temporals like ours is, I think. Okay. Yeah, that's starting to sound a little bit familiar. Huh. Yeah, this is all interesting. There's a lot more out here than I anticipated. I rewatched the Back to the Future in the Old West. Not as good as I remembered it. Yeah, I remember that being fun and just like a silly romp way when I was younger. I'm not sure that one holds up as well as the other ones. Honestly, as much as I think the time travel mechanics of Back to the Future are silly, I love those movies. Those are great. They're among my favorite time travel movies, again, because it doesn't need to be realistic, especially the more you veer toward comedy, the more you could just ignore all the, I don't know, the logic of it and stuff. It's silly to nitpick over that when you're watching a comedy. Back to the Future is great. 2, I want to rewatch 2, by the way. That's obviously the darker one, and it's the more like weird back and forth crazy timelines movie. And I'd be interested in seeing that one again. I can't remember if it's like good dark or like just dark trying to be too dark. All right. Well, I think honestly, everybody, unless people have a lot more to say, I probably am going to cut this off within the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. It's getting a little not late. I know you guys are all up later than me. I'm up in Alaska where it's not quite 8 o'clock, but my family settles in a little earlier and I'm not feeling 100% my best. Today I found out that H.G. Wells' The Time Machine had a eugenics message. Oh, I don't recall that. Now you have me curious. I wouldn't be surprised. Eugenics was like way too accepted in popular society back then. I thought the message was just I took it as kind of a message, like a criticism of social classes and stuff like that, right? Like the ones on the surface became weak and the ones underneath became strong. I don't remember the name, but I read I was like a kid when I read the book, but I have a strong impression of the upper class evolving into a mentally and physically feeble class of people, and the ones down in the dark becoming like maybe a little animal like, but more powerful. I don't know. It seemed to me like a criticism more of like what happens when you bury the working class. But again, I'm remembering that from a long time ago. I've only the movie where Jack the Ripper steals the time machine and H.G. Wells. That feels a little familiar. Only seen. What's the name of that one, Fletcher? Or maybe it's an episode of TV. Time After Time. Time After Time movie, because now I'm getting a Cyndi Lauper song. That looks a little familiar in kind of a cornball way. Huh. Well, I'm not doing really well at keeping up on all these suggestions, but of course, this is recorded in YouTube history, so I'll go back and check it out. Well, unless somebody throws something in the chat that gets my attention and gets me wanting to keep carrying on, I think I'm going to wrap up here in a minute. So thank you all for joining. If you're a patron, well, just thank you in general. Thank everybody for showing up. It's a lot of fun to me that I can just throw something together and people come and talk about it. YouTube has been a fun adventure for me. And as much as I built the whole Prophet Azad thing, I'm enjoying moving on to something new. And it's kind of trippy to me that I have, even though my audience is smaller now, that I have as many people as I do show up to this stuff, to the point that a secondary channel, I can get, 15 people to hang out with me. So Larry McClellan, our super chat's disabled. This channel is not monetized yet. It hasn't met the thresholds of views and all that stuff. So did I lose the password to Prophet Azad? No, I still have that. I certainly hope I would, but I'm not continuing on that channel. If people have just random questions, by the way, I'm here now. So just ask me questions about anything if you want, just even about my channels and history and all that stuff. But yeah, I still have access to Prophet Azad. People have asked me several times why I don't just add things to that channel. It's just because that's its own body of work. I did its thing. I know I could get more views by staying there and just switching my content. Views would go down, but not as much. But I hate seeing that happen to a channel. I always hate when somebody's channel goes drastically down in views. And I just have this protective thing about that body of work and just having it stay crystallized as its own thing, not have people wander in and say, why is your channel different now? Or say, what the heck, why were you an atheist YouTuber before? And now you're talking about this. So, and yeah, something just bugs me about seeing a channel deteriorate so that, have a couple thousand people watching on something that has like tens of thousands of subscribers. Oh, Dennis Quaid movie Frequency. Yeah, I recall that. They're trying to I think his son is talking to his dad when he's younger, trying to save his mom or something, right? I can't remember. Dunder Mifflin, were you going to do another Severance video? I might. Uh, Severance is so niche, though. There are a lot of people who have a lot of interest in it. Uh, it's kind of a niche thing, and I don't want to get too pigeonholed. Also, I really love the show, but talking about it as much as I did over 2 videos, I got a little burnt out on it, and I don't do my best work when I start getting burned out. So I might revisit it maybe sometime after season 2. I'm loving season 2. It's great, but I'm not looking to keep doing a lot of videos about it at this point. Fletcher, is Prophet Zod and Zod the same person? As he his own prophet? That's that's digging deep into the lore of something that's just a name choice, to be honest. Yeah, people use Zod as just a name for me. If that's what you're getting at, then just call me Zod or whatever. That's probably the easiest way to refer to me, especially since I got myself in a hole and had Prophet Zod and Mr. Zod. Oh, Quantum Leap. Yeah, Quantum Leap was just a standard change the timeline thing. It was more serious, but I don't feel like that was really about the mechanics of time travel. That was just more about a yearning to change the past or interact with it. So again, there's no real logic to what I do and don't accept. I liked that one. It's fine. I haven't seen the new one, by the way. I heard it's good, but I've just never gotten around to it. David, Severance is annoying me. I'm sorry to hear that. I can see why the second season frustrates people. I've enjoyed it, but yeah, there are a lot of episodes that seem to divert from the main plot. But I've enjoyed how it's built so far. I'm curious where it's going. But I can see why it's not for everybody. Anyway, I guess I keep just letting myself get distracted as people say things. So if something else pops up in the next minute or two, I'll talk about it. I'm just to give a heads up too. I'm working on a time travel video now. It's probably going to be a little bit long, but it's interesting. And sorry, by the way, if this is a little rambly. Talking about time travel is something where you really have to have your thoughts together and organize what you're saying. And that's hard to do in a live stream. So I hope it ends up being better in a more structured format. But I'm going to do that. I might start getting into. I said I was going to do some videos about the Iliad and just kind of a guide to the Iliad and discussing it a few books at a time. So hopefully some people enjoy that. But if people have different ideas for videos, just let me know. I'm always going back through our list of comments. People are suggesting ideas to me, but always feel free to throw in more. And if you have little short things you want to see me talk about here, just short little curiosities on the extracurricular channel, just tell me that too. My voice isn't holding up super well. You can see me probably taking little pauses. My throat's a little rough, so I'm probably going to call it for the night. But thank you for joining me. This is a lot of fun. And there I go again. Hope to see you in Zadanza on my main videos, hanging out in chats whenever I throw a live stream. It's been fun. So I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.